Alright, so this is our first full, first content lecture, sorry. I'm just going to set up the slideshow. Okay, so this first lecture is about grammar, and grammar sort of has a bad reputation. When we're in high school or in elementary school, grammar is what we do in English class. Our English teacher will tell us, don't end a sentence in a preposition, or you should say John and I instead of John and me. And some of us think this is fun, but a lot of us really think that it's just kind of a lot of work for, it's not how we really talk. And these are, important rules to know for that sort of prestigious academic sounding talk. But in linguistics and in this class, we're more interested in how people actually talk when they use language, because we believe that this can give us some insight into the human brain and into how our minds work. We know that in our daily lives we all say things that are quote-unquote incorrect, but we still understand each other. So if you're familiar with Simpsons, little Ralph he says funny things sometimes, but me fail English, that's impossible. That's kind of actually insightful. Because as a native English speaker, there's a lot that we know that we haven't even been taught. So the fundamental sort of mystery of linguistics is that we all regularly, on a daily basis, say things that nobody has taught us to say. That sentence I just said, I've never said that sentence before, you've never heard it before, but we still understand it. So that's pretty cool. And the reason that we understand it is that there are some rules underlying our knowledge of language. And what we do in linguistics is we try to find out what these rules are. Some of these rules are universal, and they exist in all of the languages. And some rules are more specific to particular languages. And we're interested in both of those types of rules. We're not so interested in the rules that your English teacher taught you. We're interested in the rules that are in your brain. Alright, so this is "'Twas Brillig and the Slithy Toves." This comes from the poem "The Jabberwocky" by Lewis Carroll, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It is it's a great poem, and it's really interesting from a linguistic perspective. This is a really famous example of using language in a way that no one taught us, because no one taught us what slithy means. Yet we sort of have an idea. We may not know exactly what it means, but to me it seems maybe like something slimy. I definitely know that it's an adjective of some sort. Toves is a noun, and slithy is telling us, it's like slimy toads is kind of how I think of it. But that's something that no one taught us. Alright, so thinking about English, how do we know this is kind of English? This is sort of a special English, but it's still English. So what do we know when we're speaking English? Well, obviously we know some words. We would all agree that horse is a valid word of English. It sounds like English, it looks like English, we know what it means, so we'll give that a thumbs up. Unpossible, like Ralph said, this is kind of a word of English. We understand what it means. There's some things that are a little bit wrong with it, maybe, but it's still, if I said it's impossible to not love language, you would all know exactly what I meant. So we'll give that a pretty good thumbs up. Slithy, this is also kind of, this is something that we can deal with our English, with our knowledge of English. Even if we don't know exactly what it means, we know that it's an adjective, and it sounds like English. You can already see my 2 thumbs down for the next ones. Slithy, just a little bit different from slithy, but as part of your knowledge of English grammar is that you can't start a word with TL. So slithy, that doesn't sound quite right. So that's not English. And finally, flee. This is, we also know that this isn't English because these sounds, it's just, we don't have a sound like that in English. But it is a perfectly good word. In Navajo, it means horse. So we know all these sorts of things about words in English, just, by living in a country where people speak English, or whatever your native language is. We also know things about how to combine the words. And this is called syntax, and we'll learn a little bit more about it, I think, next Monday. So in one episode of The Simpsons, Homer was taken over by a German imposter. And one of the clues to the fact that he's an imposter is that he talks kind of different. He says, "I am a new tie wearing." The words sound like English, but the order of these words is not. In English, we would say, "I'm wearing a new tie." And this is because in English, the verb wearing occurs at the end of the sentence, and in English, it tends to occur somewhere between the subject and the object. Now, even if you're not comfortable with subject and object and verb, you don't need to worry about that yet. But you still know that "I am wearing a new tie." You know that that's English, and you know that "I am a new tie wearing." You know that the words, even though they are English words, they're not strung together in quite the right order. So the really cool thing about all of this is that this knowledge is tacit. Tacit means that it's something that we can't articulate what the rules are. Even though we all know what ambigens means, or we all know all these rules of language, we can't necessarily express them. And we even knew many of these things about language before we could even talk ourselves. There's really good evidence that babies, even when they're only saying mama and papa, dada, that they know quite a bit about language, but they don't know, and we don't know, how it is that we know that. So even though we know the rules, we don't know we can't really express how to apply them. That's really important. Alright, so here's some examples. I'm actually going to split this lecture into two so I can upload it to YouTube. So we'll be back with part 2 in just a moment.